The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabbir and Bersaftar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers.
All right, Sven, happy first show of 2025.
Happy 2025. Happy Friday. Happy yet another snowmageddon on the East Coast.
I will take snow. You can just send that snow here to California, and we can dump it on the fires in Los Angeles. It's really tragic watching friends evacuate. I heard a story on Reddit about someone who was in the Costco. There was two people they were behind, and the first one said, "You can get 2 bottles of the whiskey. You just lost a house."
No, it's horrendous. I have family well impacted out there. It's just I just saw a social media clip on the devastation. I've never seen anything like it. It looks like a war zone. The entire Palisades neighborhood's gone. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I don't know. Of course, it being online, there's conspiracy theories about the fires being set on purpose and everything else. But ultimately, just the massive density of that area. I mean, there's single family homes in many cases, and actually very, very expensive ones. But it's just a lot of people to be displaced. Whether or not you live in an $8 million home or an $800,000 home or an $80,000 home, it's still your home.
And it's not just the home. There's so many. Think about it. If you and I would need to all of a sudden pack up all these pictures behind me, all the memories. It's a lot of it is that, right? If you don't get all that out, that's all gone. And so the saddest part, by the way, I think, and then we can go into our normal topics, is this morning's news report. LA County Sheriff is dealing. So the parts that are not super burning, but where people are evacuated, they have massive amounts of looting. Because folks know houses are empty and everything is empty because everything is evacuated. So, of course, criminals will take advantage of any, never let a crisis go to waste and take advantage of it and start to looting. And it's incredible that people will always take advantage of misfortune and those occurrences. It's very sad.
Well, my hat's off to the LA County Sheriff. It has to work in inside a forest fire or the edges of a forest fire, right? It's not there's not smoke there. There's not smoke inhalation risk and everything else.
Agreed.
Well, let's talk about the story that I can't imagine we wouldn't have talked about. Sven, tell me about your new Birkin bag.
my working. So you and I chatted about this online via text a little bit, but it was interesting just in time for the holidays before you and I both kind of flew off and relaxed a little bit. There was a lot on social media starting to be a hype about a bag that's being sold or was being sold on the online platform of one of the world's largest retailers, Walmart. Just to clarify, it wasn't sold by Walmart. It was sold on their online platform or the online marketplace. And those were 2 new collections of handbags. They were called, I think, the Camugo and the Adriani. Those were reported. And that doesn't sound like news, but what was the news is that the fact that those bags looked extremely similar to one of the most famous, if not the most famous bags in the world, the Birkin Bag made by Hermes. Now, for the uninitiated, which actually includes me, since I don't carry that many purses, the Hermes Birkin is, it's not a bag anybody can have. You can't just walk into a store and get that. It's for aficionados. It's for collectors. You literally have to apply to Hermes to buy one. Once you're selected to be one that can get one, you design it. You pick all your own materials. It's custom made for you, and it takes months for you to get this. The starting prices for this bag are somewhere in the $10,000+ range. And they're being resold at auction, right? And some of them at auction have fetched up to $400,000, which, when you look at how much these bags originally cost, that is a better investment than the S&P 500 or gold has been over the last 35 years. So, Shabbir, what's your take on this? I know we talk about counterfeits here. This is clearly not a counterfeit. So how is this relevant for us?
Well, I think that like many products that get counterfeited, it sometimes intersects with trademark law. And unlike the HIV medicines that we've seen, these have a different kind of trademark. It's a design trademark, and a trade dress protection. So it protects. You can't make an exact copy and call it a Birkin bag, right? That alone is a problem.
Right.
And so I think what you've seen is that there is a trademark that protects some of the appearances of the bag, like the shape of the bag, if there's distinctive fasteners and closures and straps and specific stitching. But, ultimately, if you're super careful, I think you can make a pretty close copy. These folks may or may not have been careful enough, but it seems like Walmart's taken them down. And I know that Hermes and other apparel and fashion designers have gone to protect their bags. But ultimately, I think you could make a similar looking bag. And as long as you're not dumb enough to call it a Firkin or a Workin or something like that has an obvious piggyback on the trademark name, you could probably get away with it. But it'll be interesting to see, like, if Walmart doesn't do the enforcement for Hermes themselves. Even if they do, it's going to find itself elsewhere.
Yeah. I found it encouraging because you and I, as we were prepping for the show, were looking on Walmart's sites, and we were looking elsewhere. We couldn't find that very specific bag that was mentioned in the viral videos anymore.
Yeah.
The specific Hermes colors, which is that bright orange, for example. None of that was available anymore. So it's good, and I would assume that had to do with Hermes reaching out to Walmart seeing what the news coverage was and taking proactive steps to, on their online platform, enforce and monitor and take, postings down. And so it's always encouraging when you see a platform hopefully taking those proactive steps. But to your point, it is a workaround for folks where they make something look just similar enough, but not too similar. And protecting a trade dress is really hard, and it's really expensive also to do it. But for companies, if you have something that is iconic, for companies to really go down the road and protect every element of what the design that you have to get the ultimate protection, it is really worth it. It works in certain cases. Tiffany, for example, has the color of the Tiffany boxes trademarked and trade dressed, so you can't use that color. So there's a variety of folks that do that. So it was interesting. It's certainly not light news coverage, but I found it a very, very interesting case, and especially how big it went virally. So
I remember an economics podcast a couple years ago. It might have been This American Life about the Birkin bag. And there were people telling stories. You couldn't even order them then. There were people telling stories of going into an Hermes store, buying like $20,000 or $30,000 worth of scarves, and then asking if there was any Birkin bags available. And the sales associate had a set of rules to follow of, if you have purchased X number of dollars of other products and there's no other red flags, you're allowed to offer them a Birkin bag. And so there were people who would go into stores to buy product to resell and then also ask for a Birkin bag. And, you just get lucky and wear it. But I actually can't imagine running around town. I'm just not the right person. I can't imagine I or my wife, but mostly my wife, running around town, carrying around the cost of a car in a purse.
Yeah, it's definitely a status symbol, but it's really, this is for aficionados and collectors. The interesting thing, and one of the pieces actually, Angelique Chamberlain, who was interviewed on it, is somebody that I ran into in the Polaris Lounge for United years ago, flying out to Europe. And she and I sat next to each other. Our flights were delayed. We were talking for a while. We connected. We exchanged information. And so it was interesting when she put actually on her LinkedIn, like, I got interviewed for this because she is one of those collectors who gets invited to buy these bags. And it's not necessarily my hobby, but I get it. And I'm very happy that Hermes was able to protect their trademark and do that. But what else do we have in good trademark news, especially in regards to like marketplaces and what's happening out there?
So if you want to know where to buy your fake Birkin bag, this week, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative put out a report that we read every year. Everybody in the anti-counterfeiting world reads, called the Notorious Markets Report. And it basically outlines, it's got a highlight about a specific issue, and then they highlight a number of online marketplaces that are known for distributing counterfeit product, and then physical marketplaces. It's almost like a tour guide. If you wanted to go on a world tour of where you could buy fake stuff, these physical marketplaces would be it. And this year's issue highlight was illegal online pharmacies, and our friends over at the Alliance for Safe Online Pharmacies got a big shout out, which I was happy to see because they used a lot of their data. But my favorite of this is the physical markets, right? The physical markets.
Tell me about it.
There's places around the world where, there's just a marketplace that is focused on crime, basically. And so there were 33 of them listed in different countries, many of them in Mexico and South America and China. And it's often out in the open, completely just like a flea market of counterfeits, with no law enforcement, and all these Psyche shoes and Air Wardens and things like that, and probably Birkin bags.
In my former work for a large Fortune 5, where I worked in a brand protection organization, we went to Asia and we went to one of those marketplaces, Guangzhou, just across the border from Hong Kong. And yeah, how can you describe it? It's a massive kind of like Costco / outdoor marketplace / fairgrounds. And you're right. You walk through and it's all the products, and you walk in, you can say, okay, I want 18 of these Fuji bags. They're not Gucci, and you can exactly design how you want them, how many. You basically create wholesale orders of the stuff there. And you're right. It's incredible. We did this, 15 years ago at this point. I don't think it's safe to go now anymore. But yeah, these marketplaces are incredible. We went with security and everything, but boy, oh boy, they exist. And it is when you're there, it is crazy how lawless it is.
Yeah. I think the favorite, though, of course, the one that I read, because, I live and die by counterfeit medicine, is the El Santuario market in Guadalajara, which I've never been to in Mexico. And I probably don't get to go without kidnap insurance and bodyguards. But it's a well-known open-air market where you can buy fake, stolen, and expired medicine from the vendors there. And it's well-known. The report says that legitimate manufacturers of medicine say that market alone has moved billions of dollars of unsafe and fake medicine, and that is conducted entirely in the open. Like there's absolutely no shame or concern for prosecution. And I imagine that this is how the purport has always been. But some years ago, they started introducing Notorious online markets. And so do you have a favorite online market that they listed?
So, the online markets, I am always surprised by their extreme resilience on how long they stay on these reports. So the Special 301 Notorious Market reports, I think it's a decade old now at this point. And the couple of them, the one that I laughed about that I saw is DHgate. I've seen DHgate for years. It is driving brand owners nuts because they're very large, very prolific, sell a lot of counterfeit. They make it look really, really legit. The product that you buy there when it arrives also often is produced in a way that it looks very legit. A friend of mine on there bought a carbon frame bike from a large brand, and let's just say it didn't work that well when he rode it. It's made out of proper carbon, so it's one of those things that kind of collapses under you right after the first street bump. So there's really consumer safety issues with that. Yeah. But DHgate has been on that list for forever. It was noted in this year's report that they have increased takedowns. But as far as when you look at DHgate, there's the amount of counterfeit on there is massive. But my absolute favorite on there still is Pirate Bay. When the report came out, and I saw Pirate Bay on there, and Cyber Bay is a streaming, so they do movies and all that.
Yeah.
And you and I, we talked. I'm like, I thought they were taken out, and so I did a Google search, and yeah, they had various enforcement actions. The largest one, the last one, like 2013, 2015 in Sweden, where they literally stormed the offices of Pirate Gate in Sweden, shut them down, lots of people arrested, servers taken out. And I remember it was announced as like, And it was in coordination with all kinds of law enforcement, Pirate Gate taken out. Well, they just moved servers, so now they operate out of wherever they operate out of, and just do it out of a different country that has not as robust enforcement or cares about laws like Sweden. So I found that incredible that Pirate Bay, I think, is going 10 years strong at this point. And according to users who use it, has a really slick Netflix-like interface with a very good recommendation algorithm and everything.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how very, very just resilient these illegal places are, and how hard they are to take down, because I can just hop my server country to country, right?
Do you actually think that, like, maybe after the first Pirate Bay bust, a whole second group of people were like, hey, I think that name's available. Let's put up another Pirate Bay. And of course they couldn't trademark it, and they're already on the dark web. So if they wanted to like have a beef between these two sets of operators, I suppose they could actually buy Hitman with Bitcoin on the dark web, since it's already there.
What I read about Pirate Bay, they literally are a disjointed band of pirates. So it's there's not an organized structure behind it of just folks that love to share and distribute pirated movies, TV shows, etc. So when it's so decentralized, it's hard to take it out because you actually don't have a leadership that I can go after as law enforcement.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one to crack. You would need to get way more comprehensive about DNS blocking and really, really knocking out. Countries are blocking these servers wherever they can, but it's kind of like a whack-a-mole. So I found them they're like a cockroach. They're
so
really
my little bit of fame for dark web crime is that I live very close to the West Portal Library, where the darknet market operator Dread Pirate Roberts was sitting in the library with his laptop when he got arrested. Right. So they waited for him to have the laptop open and for him to be logged in. And the federal agents were waiting in the library and then grabbed it. I think they tried to keep him from closing the laptop because that would have logged him out.
Oh, that's funny.
That's just close. So, I mean, all fun and kidding aside about these notorious marketplaces, what do you see as the policy usefulness of this report in coming years, or in the next year until the next one comes out?
I think this is the 19th year that this one report has been published. The Special 301 in totality has been out since I think 1980s. So this is a government tool that is really used to put a notice out and make sure that is brought to public notice that these are real violators, provide targets for law enforcement, provide diplomatic leverage as you negotiate this. For example, the USTR then negotiates with other countries on what they should be doing. So it's really used as a tool for further government action. And what I think is important here, and so this will be a shout out to folks like we work with, for example, the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition, who I know every year puts, dutifully their response in. And sometimes they struggle with brand owners actually providing examples of marketplaces. And I think brand owners sometimes struggle to or don't want to provide it because they're like, oh, it doesn't do anything. It does. It just is a very slow moving wheel. But it is an effective wheel. It actually does do things. It just does them in a slower timeline. And so I really encourage any brand owner that listens, anybody who's connected to this, if you work with any association that provides comment to the Special 301, either Special 301 or Special 301 Notorious Markets, provide them your comments, provide them your feedback. Make sure the government knows that, hey, these are the websites and marketplaces and physical marketplaces that really, really, really bug us, because it will lead to investigations. It will lead to, Homeland Security, through Interpol, through Europol, in their larger operations like Operation Pangea, to then actually act on these things. So there's an upside to that. But what I think is important for companies to know is that, yes, this is not a quick like, oh, I report the website and it will be gone. That's not it. But it is important to report. It's important they're out there. And so I strongly encourage folks to work on this.
I can imagine that if you are doing some bilateral political work between two countries, that one of the first things, like, if the U.S. and Vietnam if the president's going to go to Vietnam and do like a state visit and, talk about cooperation between the countries, the first thing that the Vietnamese government might do is to look at this report and be like, where are the marketplaces we have to clean up? And I'll take periodic enforcement for political pressure over no enforcement at all. And so I think this report provides a starting point for what are the problem areas that everybody knows about and that are an embarrassment to the country that hosts them as a start. So, I mean, I see value in the report. I mean, one could just call it a political operation, but you have to start somewhere. Like, identifying the problem, naming the problem is the first step of fixing the problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. I worked with years for the U.S. Chamber and or with the U.S. Chamber. And so, yes, every year when the special Notorious Market report came out, they told us the tales of, exactly as you say, embassies calling, pretty upset of like, hey, how do we make it on this list? What's going on? What can we do? Because if a country cares, you don't want to be on that list. If you are a country that cares, you don't want to have eight websites or markets on those lists, and you will do things. The best example of that actually was when Alibaba at the time was named to the Notorious Market report, and it was right around the time as Alibaba was thinking about doing an IPO in the United States. And being on that report and trying to do an IPO in the United States created massive change, right? So Alibaba hired a former Disney executive to kind of fix their IP issues, really did some very, very good actions, starts to take a ton of them down. Alibaba is now a good platform to work with. Again, the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition actually has a couple of really good cooperative working agreements with them. And that really created change. Now, it was motivated by, hey, we want to make sure our US IPO goes well.
Yeah.
But so, again, they're tools. They got to be looked as a tool, as one of the many things in the toolbox. And to your point, and it kind of circles back to the previous one, last year, I know that we had some families that got hurt by counterfeit pills submit on the issue of Snapchat. Now, it didn't get included as a notorious market, but it got mentioned in the intro of saying, hey, we are aware of this. So it's a tool, because as a company, if you take this serious, you don't want to be on that list.
Yeah, that was Amy Neville from the Alexander Neville Foundation. She and her husband wrote that submission comment for the Notorious Markets. And it was actually pretty cool to see the U.S. Trade Representative acknowledge that, Snapchat might be a notorious market where a significant amount of counterfeit pills with a human toll had been trafficked.
Yeah. So trademark owners, get with your trade associations or yourself and submit comments. It takes 10, 15 minutes, not that hard. We gladly, should be an hours, we'll gladly help with thoughts, but do it. It's an important tool.
Yeah.
All right. While we're talking on pills, kind of switch to a different story.
You can.
Well, I know you were excited because you shared the story with me before Christmas, like, oh my God. And I know you're incredibly excited about this indictment of a Chinese pill press maker, right? So as we know from the Partnership for Safe Medicine with whom you work, pill presses and molds have been flowing out of China for years, right? But because we don't have good extradition treaties with China, or actually don't any, those individuals hardly ever get arrested, right?
Yeah.
We don't see them. We don't see prosecutions. We might see an indictment, but if the person lives in China, that doesn't really matter. But in this case, it was different. So tell us about what happened in U.S. versus Chen.
So this almost seems like an investigation that sort of started at the beginning of the Biden administration and finished here at the end of the Biden administration. So, yeah, as you know, pill presses, which are machines used to make pills and by criminals to make fake pills, and the molds that make them in the shape of the real pill are often made by Chinese manufacturers and sold into the U.S. And you can't just do that, right? Like when you want to sell or import one of these machines, you need to file paperwork with the DEA. And in fact, eBay paid a nearly $60 million fine because they were a marketplace that facilitated these transactions, but did not do any due diligence to make sure that the people buying and selling them had filed these DEA forms. Homeland Security investigations back in 2020 at the beginning of the administration was like, we are going to prioritize prosecuting these pill press machine manufacturers who are selling them into the U.S. because they're literally tools for making death, right? I have countless numbers of family advocates who I've met who've had family members die of fake pills. And the pills had too much fentanyl in them as opposed to the real ingredients of an oxycodone. And one pill killed. In fact, in the case of Tosh, Kerry Luther's son, he took a quarter of a Xanax that was illegal counterfeit and made with fentanyl. And there was enough fentanyl in that quarter pill to actually kill him and kill him in very short order. So Homeland Security Investigations started this investigation and noticed that there was a company that had a presence in the U.S. and China, and started an investigation of her. They communicated with her with undercover. She actually made a business trip to the U.S., and I think during that trip they got a copy of her phone, and they started looking through her messages along with what she said to the undercover agents, and they built a case showing that she did a number of things that are really reprehensible. One of which is that she, according to the affidavit, right? This has not been adjudicated yet, but according to the affidavit, she sold and shipped these machines to individuals who did not have and did not file the DEA paperwork and get approval to receive them.
Of course.
Right. So that right there is illegal, if she did it. And then in some cases, there were messages, according to the affidavit, between her and potential customers where she said that because they didn't have paperwork, she would break the machines up into multiple pieces and ship them to evade seizure by Customs and Border Protection.
Yeah.
And that also, and mislabel them, right? Like some of her shipments were labeled fuel injectors or machine parts. They were not labeled, part of pill press machine used to make fake pills, and not sent to an actual drug manufacturer.
That's incredible.
It was about October 2023 when they got this big break. She came to the U.S., to Las Vegas for a trade show. And by this time, Homeland Security Investigations had already built a significant case in order to arrest her and indict her. And as far as I know, I haven't double checked her records, but she should still be in U.S. custody. And that's the only way you're going to get her. As a Chinese national, You can't extradite her from China. And that's, that's a big opportunity that you would not let her leave the country once you knew that you had the evidence and you knew you had her physically.
Yeah. Well, first of all, big shout out, right, to HSI for conducting the case as comprehensively that they did. If we put the case in the show notes, it's an incredible piece to read, how detailed it was. And for me, it was how long it took, right, Shabbir? It was over 2 years, and how resource intensive that is.
Yeah.
And that's not something I think brand owners always understand, right? So, and the reason why I say this is we work with a lot of brand owners, and sometimes we get to well, why doesn't HSI just do more? Why don't they investigate more? That's why, because a really, really good case that stretches across countries or into China, other countries, it's very resource intensive. It takes a long time, and it takes a long time because we do have a very good due diligence, and we have a due process for anybody who's accused of a crime. So you got to be really buttoned up to make sure that case holds water. And so in this case, it took 2 years, which is incredible.
I'll give you an example. People who are not familiar with chain of custody of evidence and forensic work don't know this, but if you go to do a test buy on an illegal online pharmacy website, you can't do it, right? You have to. I've seen agents talk about how they have to have screen recorders that are specially designed to record them in the process of doing the transaction and recording the address where it came from and the IP address, and then having to trace the records of that IP address to the provider to prove who's culpable. It's very complicated, as you know, to produce evidence that will hold up in court. And it takes time, and you have to get it all right. Otherwise, it's getting thrown out of court. And so it's always, I always hear this phrase, you can't arrest yourself. You can't prosecute yourself out of this problem, but you still have to prosecute. You can't,
Yes.
the enforcement is required if we're going to have people follow the rule of law. And to do that requires resources and time and diligence on the part of the investigators. And so, yeah, many, many props to Homeland Security investigations, which has, I think over the past 5 years, I've really become aware of a number of the ways in which they've really done a lot of great work around taking counterfeit drugs out of the harm's way of Americans.
Yeah. No, and for brand owners, it's important, like in this case, no brand owner was involved, but, as we discussed on a previous podcast, when you have somebody like Gilead involved, it helps when actually the company brand owner is able to produce a lot of that case and hand it over or work with law enforcement or the investigators to provide a lot of that legwork. That helps a ton. It also helps. There's, for example, right now, Steve Francis, who used to be Homeland Security, who used to be IPR Center, is on his own now and is starting to build this massive thing called Brand House or IP House that is going to work on having multinational investigations that feed directly into the government. So those kind of like smart private-public partnerships between what the private industry can do and investigate, take it as far as they can take it, and then hand it over for a criminal prosecution. I think there's a key for that there in the future, and especially when you have something that takes 2 years. But you brought up a point when you and I were chatting a little bit, because it took 2 years, like there's an impact that some of these things operate for like 2 years, right?
I mean, you've got to ask yourself, if you had a family member who died of a fake pill after 2020, whether or not a machine made by this defendant who's not had their case adjudicated and not been assigned guilt yet, whether or not this person might have been responsible for their death. Yeah. And I actually have some concern that this case flies under the radar and maybe doesn't get the sufficient full force and weight of what the Department of Justice could do. And I'm really going to be watching this case, and I'm going to encourage others to watch it too, to make sure that this person doesn't get a light sentence. You may remember this, but I will be angry until I shuffle off this mortal coil about a gentleman who ran a long-running company in Canada that trafficked in counterfeit cancer drugs and who did not spend a day in jail, like $78 million of counterfeit cancer drugs. And for a variety of reasons I won't go into in here, he cut a plea deal with the U.S. Attorney of Montana, this Canadian guy, and he ended up not ever serving a day in jail. And I still remember how we at PSM got calls from survivors of people whose family members died of cancer, and the treatment they got was from doctors who bought from this guy. And they would call and say, do you think my wife would have lived if she'd gotten real cancer medications? And I'm like, I don't know what kind of cancer medication she got. I don't know if your doctor bought a lot or a little, and I don't know what your wife got. And there's no way to know. But the fact that you had to endure that risk is a crime.
Yeah.
And this guy should have done more, at least. 0 days in jail, any more jail would have been appropriate, but he did not. And he walks around today, and I think he's still a licensed pharmacist in Canada.
That's so crazy and insane. I know we've talked about, like we talk about this, but to your point, like when these things take this long, and for me, I know what motivates you and I for work, like anything we can do with counterfeit issues, counterfeit medicines, like when I work with you at PSM, anything we can do to save a life. Like I always if I present and what I present on, what I work on, who I educate, if that saves one life, that was all worth it, right? And I know that motivates all of our law enforcement partners we work on. They're like, if I can save one. And I know one of the things that haunts them often is actually the timeline of these investigations. They're like, if we could have done this faster, if there's any way we could have done this faster, how many more lives could have been saved? So it's definitely there. So for brand owners, anything you can do to support law enforcement in these things, to provide additional intelligence, I think always helps. Because if we can speed this up in any way, that'd be lovely. So
I just don't want this defendant, assuming that the case holds up and they're guilty, to go home and be deported after a year here. That's just not
right.
For all the harm that selling pill press machines, which can themselves make 10,000 deadly pills an hour, that's just not an appropriate criminal deterrent. And maybe there is no deterrent, but if you're a pill press maker in China, we're not going to be able to just arrest you. You're going to have to leave the country to arrest you. And
Yeah.
I think you probably operate with some impunity of the harm you do to American lives. And once we have one, like, this person should not do more penalty and is appropriate for their crime, but they should take the full force of what that penalty should do. Like, we should not deport her after a year, once the trial is over. She needs to really suffer, because when she goes back to China, she's not going to suffer. Like, I know that at the beginning of the Biden administration, they had this thing called Operation Chainbreaker, where they were trying to go after the asset of pill press manufacturers and people who make precursor chemicals for fentanyl. And that's great, but I think everybody knew that was, looking through the entire federal government to find out what you could use as a tool to go after these people, because you did not have the ability to arrest them in China and to extradite them. So we've got one. They need to make sure that she experiences the full force of the prosecution that is commensurate with her crime, assuming she is found guilty. If you read the complaint, and we'll put it in the show notes, if you read the complaint, she unless this is entirely fabricated, there's a lot here to answer for.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, let's follow it. Let's hope it happens. And to your point, let's hope it starts to act a bit more of a deterrent, because yes, if she gets a significant sentence that she has to bear out in the US, it might act as a deterrent. It might start to act too. Stronger regulations against importation of pill presses will help. More resources for customs to actually detect these things will help. So there's a lot of things that still can be done. I know you and I worked on a legislation to increase penalties for anybody that uses pill dyes in the United States, like that, to press pills. So I think there's a lot of solutions still left. And let's see where we can get done in 25, right?
Yeah. Well, speaking of 25, let's do predictions. And I'm going to make my first prediction right here off the cuff, which is that we will not be quitting our day jobs for the millions of dollars we make from this podcast.
I think that's a pretty solid assumption. And yes, this is, as you and I talked about, for me, it's a good creative outlet to talk about the things that we see out there, and to use it as a, hey, here's what we see. Here's what's important for brand owners to know. Here's some cool tech we see. Here's some cool new investigative techniques we saw. Here's something, hey, have you thought about doing this? Because I don't see anything out there. Yes, there are conferences that do this, but there's not a weekly kind of that does it. And sharing this, like, hey, we've seen this, and talk about the topics that we see day to day on counterfeit or anti-counterfeit and everything surrounding kind of this Imitation Nation. It's fun. It's interesting. It allows you and I to look at some interesting cases like Birkin bags. And but I'm with you. I think my day job will stay with me for a while.
What's one of your serious predictions for what's going to happen in 20?
What's my serious one? My serious one is that my daytime job will stay very, very safe, because I think that the rapid collision of generative AI and how fastly that is just growing. It's the speed with which AI and the capabilities of that is growing. While at the same point in time, yesterday or this week, famously, Meta now announced that they're not going to do content moderation anymore. Other platforms don't do it. I expect other platforms to follow it as well. And so the nexus or collision of more and more content being able to be generated very fast. Like, you can create a website with AI now in 10 minutes without any coding experience, builds the entire background infrastructure.
Yeah.
And you are able to spit social media messaging out by like thousands by the hour. And if nothing is being monitored, I think we're going to see an explosion of counterfeit activity, proliferation, and just a pure just swamping the field. And that's one of the hardest things to do when you fight against online counterfeiting. One of the hardest things is the whack-a-mole of taking all of these posts and websites down. If the whack-a-mole goes from me trying to battle you on who is quicker, that's one thing. If it's a brand owner starting to play whack-a-mole with an AI, that gets really hard. So that'll become the entire thing now, the arms race on AI. So now brand protection organizations and all the folks that do all the services that help with that will have to deploy their AIs to detect those AIs. So that entire field, I think for me, will next year be something we'll talk a lot about.
I don't know if it'll be specifically counterfeiting, but I'll tell you that the entire certified fraud examiner community, which is one that I keep tabs on since I got my CA certification, is freaked out about using generative AI to do fraud at scale, right? Whether it's romance scams, which are actually those romance pig butchering scams they make hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And to be able to, it's one thing to have a room full of people who are working under duress to do the romance scam. It's another thing when the entire thing is completely automated by software. You can really scale it up quite a bit. So I think we'll definitely see more generative AI in crime, which will include counterfeiting this year.
100%. So what's your prediction? Yeah, a serious one.
So I keep tabs on this. So I feel like this is not a dangerous or reckless prediction to make, but I think we're going to see in 2025 a major drug manufacturer go public in using trademark to fight illegally counterfeit or illegally diverted medicine into the supply chain in the U.S. As you know, the largest, most interesting, most expensive and costly counterfeiting scheme I've ever seen in my life is in the last 5 years, where outside counsel for Gilead, Patterson Belknap, and specifically the expert Jeffrey Potter in trademark law went after a $250 million HIV diversion and counterfeiting ring. Many of them didn't know each other, right? Like they took a lot of pains to protect different parties from other parties. They used trademark law to bust up that ring, to seize the money, and to build the body of evidence that then got used by the DOJ to follow on with criminal prosecution. I think we're not done seeing that technique, right? Probably no one knows the intersection of trademark law and counterfeit medicine better than Jeffrey Potter. I think he's got a second, third, and fourth act, and we're going to see a novel use again of trademark this year to protect American patients from unsafe medicine. So that's my prediction. I feel confident in it.
I would love to see that. Again, the former company I worked for in their brand protection organization, we used the Lanham Act a lot. We had a strong trademark, and it is a beautiful law. It's very clear. It provides fantastic leverage. So love that prediction. Really good. I got a crazy one as a prediction. And this one is out there, so hang in there with me. But part of it is because I do expect for fake websites to explode. I do expect for online postings to explode. I expect for this to exponentially go bigger. I expect for countries, and especially the US, to go back and be much tougher in enforcement against rogue websites. So the IPR Center has an operation called Operation in Our Sites. ICE also had an operation in our sites. And I'm going to date myself now, but about 15 years ago, ICE at the time had a very aggressive operation in our sites. They looked at fake websites and they seized them. And they seized them large and rapid. And then when it was seized, they put the eagle of the ICE on there and the IPR Center, and this was seized. So everybody who wanted a fake website saw this was seized and we're coming after you. There was some pushback from folks that said that this was not following due process. And so that takedown procedure became way more hung up in some due process. I do expect for, especially with the incoming administration being probably more pro-law enforcement, I expect for that to be coming back because there will be so much out there, and also with a probably stronger anti-China stance, that there will be a tougher enforcement or resurgence of the operation in our sites. And I would love to see that because at the time it was fabulous. They took down thousands of websites, and it was very, very fun. And the ICE director at the time really took a leadership position, say, I understand that's stretching the law, but this is how I see it. It was very effective at the time, and I'd like for this year to come back.
I feel like maybe they should put an ad unit box on those IPR center seizure web pages, I could like make a little revenue stream from all the traffic that goes to those seized websites.
That'd be good.
I think my last prediction is that, with the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, which was passed back in 2013 and is now has real legal obligations for people in the supply chain, that caused a lot more documentation to have to be produced that happens in the supply chain with the medicine about where it came from. And we've had some criminals who have bought medicine from unsafe places and lied about where it is. And I think this year we're going to see someone who actually gets levied real jail time for lying about the paperwork. And it'll be a first really great example of the fact that there's real criminal consequences, not just losing your wholesale or pharmacy license, not just, paying an enormous fine, but like you're going to go sit in the Gray Bar Hotel because, you lied about where the medicine came from. And honestly, I couldn't be happier.
That's right.
I'm always for enforcement of people who break the supply chain. And I've had a lot of interesting intersections with that. And I think that, we'll see this year. Someone will go sit in a federal correctional institution for lying about their Drug Supply Chain Security Act paperwork and data.
So your prediction is we're going to see a DSCSA perp walk? That's your prediction. I like it.
I think we haven't seen the perp walk, but we've seen a couple people arrested as part of the $250 million Gilead HIV diverted and counterfeit case. I don't think we got the perp walk though. It wasn't that much of a high profile PR case, but I think someone in that is going to go to jail, and people have gone to jail already, but they're going to go to jail specifically for this criminal charge, which will be interesting.
And again, that would be great because that deterrents to really take this serious, and especially all the folks in the legitimate distribution chain that have spent hundreds of millions at this point implementing that it's really, really tight. They will very much appreciate that their investments are paying off and it's good and that it makes the drug supply chain safer in the United States. So no, I think that's.
And I'll say if you're that one criminal who I won't name who's actually in a federal correctional institution as part of the Gilead case and you subscribe to my YouTube channel, thank you. Everyone else, even if you're not in a federal correctional institution and not supposed to be using the internet, don't know how that worked, please do like and subscribe to our podcast. We could really use the support, and we really enjoy meeting our listeners. And we'll have a website up soon where you can ask us questions, and we'll take them on the air.
That'd be great. Do you want to read us out?
Sure. The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner of its production. Podcast production by Elizabeth Rood. Podcast management by Sarah Imber Safdar. Theme music written by Jonathan Boyle. The license for that is on file. And for myself and Sven Bergman, have a great week.
Have a great one.
The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner of this production. Podcast production by Elizabeth Rood. Podcast management by Sarah Imber Safdar. Theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.